Hi, I'm Priscilla Gonzalez Rojo. I am the granddaughter of Cipriana Gonzalez. And as was earlier mentioned, that my grandmother is, I know it's not a secret, she was very instrumental in the community. And, there's so many wonderful stories of all the families, but with my grandmother, uh, she was very dedicated to the church. And when they built the new church, they wanted to tear down the old community church. And so she, like sent letters and whatnot to keep their church because that was their community church. It was, the men built it, the women stood behind it, and made the food, and so there's more stories to what I could do right now, but um when they told her, no, you can't, we're going to tear it down, she was very determined that this is not going to happen. So she did. She wrote a letter to the Pope and, just petitioned, and her words were strong enough to convince them to keep the St. Leo's Church here as a mission. One other thing is this beautiful park. Her and the rest of the community advocated that we need a park. She wasn't the only one, but she was there as one of the spearheaders to, keep this park for the community. So, I'm just so honored and proud to be part of her legacy. And we are with the Law Community Foundation. And, we just want to continue the stories of this community, of all the people that, you know, before them, after, during them, after them, to preserve this story, this legacy, even though some of the families, the original families aren't here anymore, but it's a very unique little city, little town. Um, and we're very passionate. We're very passionate to what we do here. We're planning workshops for the community, children, places that we do to continue the the support, the continue the leadership that these men and women did for this community. My father was a volunteer. He was a builder, like many of the men were builders, and they were concrete. They learned the land after uh, and working hard and building. And at 18 years old, my father went to work for the San Diego Gas and Electric here in Carlsbad. That is no longer there. So we see a lot of things changing here. Uh, but he volunteered with baseball, and that a lot of the kids here they took him into baseball and they played, and in 19, I would say 19, I'm trying to think of the year, but back in that time, they had a lot of kids from Encinitas, Del Mar, and Solana Beach. And they all played baseball. They didn't have any, like, race, yeah, and uniforms or anything like that, but they were winning. Their little team was winning, winning, winning. And, it was like the little team that can't type of thing. And they caught the eye of the newspaper. And at the end of the whole season, they were just one run from going to the All Stars here in their league or mini league. So that was a big deal back in the day, And so all the kids would we have events, they still talk about it. What it works, they talk about it and stuff. And that's the stories. We're just here to share the stories of our Eden Gardens. This is Heidi Grandboy from the Covarrubias family. It's on third generation. And I was talking to my cousin and and I was just letting her know to you if we're invited. Hey, can I say to now, Maria, I wasn't raised here, but they were all raised here. And knowing that, we knew all the families. Of course, all the kids knew everybody, all the kids. And it was easy for us to walk over to from one house to another. the parents and the grandparents would stop us, to find out where we were going. We could walk at 10 o'clock in the night. We had no problems, being afraid or something would happen. I think segregation definitely, but it's, I was kind of talking to her. And I said, our parents died, and a lot of them didn't give us information on the community, how it was. I know one of my aunts was very involved also with Cipriana and with a lot of the community, of course, to fight to keep the mission. My grandparents lived right across the street from the mission of St. Leo's, before you know, before the freeway came through. And so they relocated them down, like a block from St. Leo's. But it's like, if we don't have the pictures, because the families lost the pictures of the community leadership and the community kids that got together. I remember having the kermeses, which is, the fiestas, to raise money to make sure that we kept the church there together, the mission together. It was beautiful. Community went out. It didn't matter. They didn't, if they were artists or they were not artists, it didn't matter if they were dancers, but they would develop some kind of a dance in order to, raise the funds. It was a beautiful community, and it's a shame that, like, my mom never really gave me a lot of information when she was growing up. Um, I just know the information from my aunt. Like, she's a fucking gift that she's to be going. This is one of the things that is really important is for us, our third generation, us, we're that age also. We're going to be gone in a few years. And so, what are we going to leave to our kids and to our grandkids? But the legacy of La Colonia, and for them to know, how it was built and the efforts that all our ancestors had, because that was, and it was beautiful. Yes, like I think Lisa mentioned that everybody helped everybody. I know that one of my cousins, my my grandpa's cousin, my grandpa, when he was building the house, my dad's family came over from Tijuana and helped him build the house. Yeah. And it's like, well, I didn't know that. Yeah. Because my mom never told me that. But the Weezars, which, they're distant cousins, they're the ones that told me. And I go, yeah, how did I not know that? A lot of daddy's those cousins there, since they knew construction, it was like, we're going over to cousin so-and-so's house. We're going over to Thea's house. We're going to lay a sidewalk or a foundation or, build something or a wall. They need, whatever they needed, they did it. And I think it was just, it's beautiful community. It's still beautiful, but like Lisa was saying, a lot of people don't know their neighbors anymore, where before it was very united, very united. So, yes, that's true. But the parking lot there at St. Leo's, that came from your family. That's one of the things that Campus Life, the parking lot. That's where my grandfather owned it. There's a bigger conflict there, but anyway, Aunt's house is still there. The sort of the parking lots, yeah, for the church. Yeah. Not now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm Gabby B. Love, or Gabby B.S. Love, and I am not second, third, fourth generation here in La Colonia. I am actually in first generation here. My family arrived here around, I think in the late 70s, and I grew up here, going to the school systems here, all the way up to high school. And I will tell you that, I came in and everybody was related. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And But get to now, like growing up with like the friends that I made here. Honestly, it wasn't until I actually got to college and started getting involved with the Colonia Community Foundation, our Dia de los Muertos event, and all that stuff that I started to find out all the history that existed here. And, luckily we have, people curated the history as best as they could from little pieces of each, from because we do a lot of oral history that we pass on, and I think for me now, when I started to, like, it took me until going to college and take Chicano studies that I realized, whoa, we have history here in California. We have history here in the United States, and no one told me about them. Told me about it, and then discovering, first about Lemon Grove before I even knew about La Colonia and its segregational history, and all the ties that happened. And it's been so important to me, even though I haven't had all the generational roots to this community, as you all have. But something about this area feels like, and it feels like it's always been familia. And so for me, it's always been important to be able to come back and support. I can't remember who asked me to come in and participate with the Dia de los Muertos event, and I just started getting involved and started to learn, honestly, the history that I grew up in, and honestly, like living just individuals who really made an impact, not only in this community, but who have branched out into different areas that, you know, uh, that we didn't know about. Growing up here, I didn't know all these individuals that are part of our veteran walk, right? All the history of military veterans who have participated in different wars that we have lost, who have returned, and have provided, to making sure that we all as a whole get to enjoy the liberties and freedoms that we were able to grow up, right? I think as Latinos, we are in a very affluent community, and for those of us who ended up uh, going off to into our schools, right? We felt the segregation within the system, but it's not until we got the opportunity either to have the oral history from our family, and or the history that we started to learn in classes, that we learned that we had worth, and now that I'm older and I'm you know an a community activist, and being able to see Heidi and Priscilla and Lisa doing all this work, it's been obviously encouraging me to say, yeah, I want to do my part, right? And yes, I'm not, I don't have all these roots in this community, but I still feel part of it. And I think that's what this community does. It embraces you, that you feel like almost obligated to, like, well, I have to do something too. I have to participate some way. And it's a beautiful thing, because I don't think we always go into communities that are that embracing. Um, and things are changing. Things are changing here, and I think that's what makes us work even harder to provide um, events and opportunities for our current residents, to, one, learn about the history, teach our young Latinos about the beautiful history that exists here, so that they feel, as they go out into their schools, out into other spaces, that um, they have worth, that they don't have doubts about that. And I think being able to have an opportunity to teach them that, I will tell you that I have felt the need to have had to have learned it younger, but I didn't get that opportunity. But I definitely do not want to have another generation not get that information, not get that history, not get that knowledge, because um, it's so important. I mean, I think there's been so many communities that make what is, La Colonia, what makes Solana Beach, what makes, San Diego County, what makes the California and the US in general and the world. But there's a lot of history that is hidden, and such beautiful history. All these beautiful stories that, and I think that's one of the things that we have as a community. Oral history is so it's very important. And if we're able to put it in books and put it now, we have the technology for the internet and everything, where we need to pass that on to everyone, so that we do all as a whole, as a culture, as a society, know that um uh that every person has a story that makes us whole, right? That it's not just one group that did everything and voila, But no, it was a combination of so many uh, different cultures and communities that came together to make things happen. And you start off with, your small little space. First, it's family. And then you start incorporating other individuals. And lo and behold, all of a sudden you have people who are not from this community who feel part of the community. So then they want to support, right, and continue and learning more, and saying, yeah, we like the efforts that you're doing with La Colonia, and the efforts that you're doing with the Dia de los Muertos, because we're continuing to cultivate that culture that has always been here. And I think the leadership that has always been powerful here, but unless you knew, unless someone wrote it down that was able to pass on.
Yeah.
When we see our elders, or any of our people around us, sometimes sometimes we see them going off to different meetings, doing different things, and you don't even know what they're doing, but people know them, right? And that's called networking. That's called, we might call it, comarreando, or we call it chismeando, but that's actually networking. That's actually like, and that makes, all these different people actually are becoming very powerful, like creating opportunities for not just us, in making sure that what we have now continues to uh, be cultivated and strengthened, so that the next group of students, we're already looking at who's going to be taking over, in our board someday when we're not going to be here for, right? And that's what we want. And I don't think our parents, who were grandparents, and necessarily thought that it was just kind of understood, like an unwritten thing. But now I think we really feel the need and responsibility to
Fortunes.
Yeah.
How important it is to continue the stirrings.
Yeah.
Their hard efforts. That at that time they probably didn't realize, what they were doing.
No,
They didn't realize.
no, they were just trying to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's so many stories that, I even now, I'm third generation, so my grandparents came here currently in their late 30s, or I know the census shows that they were here in 1940. So my grandpa, they lost a son in World War II in 45, and then it was so. I was talking to one of the friends here, and she was talking to us about when there was a war, Del Mar with military. They had the military, and a lot of the women here used to go and serve and take food to the soldiers. Those things I didn't even know. Now, a lot of the information from my uncle that passed away, that got killed in the war, well, my grandma never talked about it because I'm sure it was very harmful for her. So then she came, kept it very private, and nobody talked about it. No, nobody talked about it. How can my mom not tell me how my uncle was when he was growing up? What happened to the pictures?
Yeah.
What happened to all those photos? Little by little, we find little photos, hidden somewhere. A lot of that.
And volunteered to go to the service. They weren't.
Oh yeah, they weren't active. They volunteered. Yeah, to go. But it's so amazing how we, our third generation, are coming out with things that we didn't know as we were growing up. So, well, like my grandfather on my mom's side, when they came, he eventually, that's a whole other story, but when he came, he became to be a foreman and of the railroad tracks maintenance, So he would travel, they had 12 kids and they would, travel, wherever they sent them. But his boss would say, Mr. Bontes, the train's coming by with the servicemen, So he would tell grandma, my mom's mother, and grandma would say, okay, we got to make burritos or whatever it is. And they would just hand, the soldiers through the windows food. And so that's, what they just did. They said, okay, we're going to make burritos or tacos or whatever. We're going to feed the men coming through. So, yeah, there's a lot of beautiful stories like that.
Yeah.
Within all the regions.
Yeah, little personal ones, and for my family that compared to everybody else, so such a young family, but the impact of just the people that we've gotten to know, and then the connectedness of this community that it was, even though that some of us haven't been able to continue to live in this community. I think we still have a responsibility to come back and be able to continue that. Unfortunately, I think with one of the things is education that and it's pushed us, a lot of us out. That is unfortunate because um, when you find a place that's home and you do everything right, you study, work hard, get the job, but then with the prices, you know, is it uh, and you can't afford to no longer live where you grew up. I think it's maybe to get away. And, but still, even though we are moved out, we still feel the responsibility to come back. And for those who are able to stay here, like, no, let's continue to strengthen the roots of this community, because it's so important to San Diego, right? It's not, and it's so important to our community to make sure it's not forgotten. And that's here, that's it, and it's Anita, that's Carlsbad, Oceanside, have pockets of communities all over, spread out, and all of us with these stories. And it's unfortunate that that uh, we're not able to stay, and then people are coming, and that's just the way things are. But people come in and move in, but don't know the history, uh, and I think that's where we step in to make sure that they do know the history, so that they are able to, continue to tell our stories and to understand that the importance of this, park community center, and how many people fought for the museum, and everything that we have, that is, that has some type of foundation here, but that it was actually because of this community, a community that was initially segregated, right? And now it's all high commodity area to live in, and but I think that's kind of one of the unfortunate things about American history, is that um, people are set aside until that space becomes high commodity. Then it's just like, because we've made it, right? See, because we've shown that we've made this area that is, from what I've heard, there and people living in little shacks that eventually were came before here, where um, you know this community was thriving, and it doing very much what they could in each generation to be able to support their kids at that to running. They tried to live in their greed, but unfortunately just cut off to that American dream, because to where you grow up and are able to live where you grow up. but I don't think we're able to do that anymore here. I think in general, San Diego, and even in California. So it's been very fortunate to work with individuals from this community who have had so many regrets, and it's so empowering to hear like life history from them as they pass it on to me. I said it's just like wow, it's cool to know that that we've been here this long, and that we continue to be here. Because I think as when we're in the classes learning about history, um, we don't see ourselves in that history. We don't see ourselves in those books.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, yeah, that's my deal, and he does this, this, and this, and we don't think it's a big deal because they're not represented in history and the books and the pages and stuff. And now that I think where we're at, we're like, oh my gosh, so and so did this and that, and they accomplished what? That's stuff that no one ever knew about, and we're able to then say, hey, let's talk about that. What a big deal that is.
Or some of the kids that got the next that should cousin. Well, okay. And they go, really? That is my day, yeah. I mean, there's some things that we just didn't talk about or really say, or we just didn't, share it because we too didn't know it until, we put the pieces together, the puzzle, and it goes, that would be. Yeah. So it's still, even though it's a big area, it's just small.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still small, and we still all share. We share all these, Solana Beach, Delmar, Cardiff, Encinitas, Acadia, Oceanside. We all share, really.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a community in Encinitas, right?
Yeah.
Santa Fe.
Yeah, so my mother was born in Encinitas, and she's 97 now. She's still with us, and she was born on 101 and Encinitas Boulevard before Encinitas Boulevard. So the easiest way to explain where the Lacadian Pizzeria is. So that's generally right where she was born at, and she, the stories of her living there for a short time and walking into the beach, White Beach, just the kids. She didn't do that really now.
Oh no.
But, and then, they traveled and then they came back. Grandpa wanted to bring them back to Encinitas, Cardiff. So they bought a house there in Cardiff. And then Grandma lived there for a while, well, the rest of her time. And then during that time, she would walk the kids to the beach, all the grandkids, which would be like my older sister and, those kids. They would just walk to the beach. Grandma walked. She didn't drive. But yeah, my mother was born and a few of the siblings were born right there too. And they were called section houses back then. Yeah. And they had like basically one room.
Yeah.
Had the one room.
That was it was an idea.
It was actually like a little bit above that,
right there.
But that's the general area there. The section house is no longer there. But that's where she was born in. So
yeah. So my family, I know, got here because my grandfather came during the Brasileiro program in the 1940s, and it wasn't until I went to college that I learned about the Brasileiro program. It's like, wait, where? There was a pull factor there. Pull factor, what is that? That term and stuff. And that's cool when you start learning all these different things. And, but I see pictures that my grandma, that held on to, and yeah, I remember that was been so my grandfather was in through the Bethel program. They did agricultural work, ended up all over, and then but then eventually they ended up in Encinitas on Vulcan. There's the little casita that they have it. It was one bedroom, I guess, and everybody was living there. People were sleeping in the closet, some people sleeping on the floor, some people got the bed. But all these different, stories and the cool thing is I think when we start to connect all the different little pieces and then we realize like, wait a minute. So yeah, when my aunt and uncles were at this school, oh, so and so was in that school too.
Yeah.
Oh, did they ever know each other? It's really cool to be able to like connect them sometimes because you're like, wait a minute, I think I heard about so and so, right? And I think that's one of the beautiful things is that because even though it's different um, communities here in Solana Beach, in La Colonia, then in Encinitas, and just little pockets that Encinitas had, and then also Carlsbad, and then also Oceanside. But then we're also actually very interconnected in some way, and each of them like putting some stories together. And when I've started reading some Victor Villaseñor, books of his, Burro Genius, some of the landmarks that he was explaining, I'm like, I know what that is. And that's really powerful for someone,
Yeah.
I think.
You can connect.
Yeah.
You have to connect and say,
Yeah.
you're part of that history. And a lot of people can't say that they're part of a particular history that they still live in. We're still involved in or and stuff. So, yeah.
And as I'm thinking, it's like we didn't see each other, we didn't see ourselves in our history books, but we're able to see ourselves in our familia stories. Because as you're talking, as I was listening to you, like say, like, oh, with my uncle, this and this, and these are his qualities, and then when you think about it, it's like, well, those are your qualities.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're doing.
And that's what I am doing. I got it from them, not realizing that's where I volunteer.
Yeah.
And,
For leadership. And organize.
Yes. I mean, it's like, okay, my nana was persistent about doing this. And I'm like, okay.
An activist, and and I know with Ray, you too, like everything that you've done, where you have been a community activist as well. You're not doing all that work from times before to even currently, and I think we're always advocating for our community, individual families and students, and it's like, where did we learn it? It didn't just come from us, and we now know it's like, oh well, so and so was this and so was that too. It's like, oh, they were. How come I never knew? And it's cool to be able to see yourself then, but that's unfortunate that we don't see ourselves in our history books that we're a part of, should be a part of.
Did you also share the commercial sectors here, like what you guys were mentioning?
Bluebird and Bluebird. You want to do one of that video? Tony's account and
You go ahead because I don't really, I don't have like the dates and
well, I don't know all the dates.
I know the market. Yeah, the first market that we had was right there, John's Market. That was the first market.
Before
Way back,
the names changed.
the names changed. It used to be called the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The market. Yes.
And the salsa was phenomenal. And that recipe, I don't know where it's gone, but
Yeah. It was old school market, with wooden floors, but I was little, and I was raised in Encinitas when, daddy and mommy, they built over there. But, always because family, we always came back. But, we'd go to the market, because the community had to make their own. They had to make their own stuff.
Where they couldn't go out from here. In
Right.
Solana, they couldn't go out really because it was so segregated.
Oh my.
So then they had
had
another market at the corner, like in front of Fidel's. They had another market, and it was the Garcias, and they also had like a pool hall in the back. That's not in the history.
Yeah.
Because I remember, we did one block.
Some of the wives don't want it to be.
Yeah, no, they don't want us to mention it. But I remember my grandma used to say, go to the Garcia, market and go get your grandfather. He's in the back in the pole. So we used to go into the market, and then they would like through doors. And we used to yell at my grandpa, Abuelito, grandma's calling her, But that was another market. And then they have their own barbershop, hairdresser, because they had a Tony's, definitely Tony's restaurant.
which started as a barbershop. I mean, that's a whole story in itself. And so that's
good to follow up.
yeah.
You a couple. Yes, I mean, definitely will give you all the history.
Yeah. And then they had their own school here. If you got the Escuelita across San Leo's Church was the school. Now it's an apartments now, but they had to make their own, in order to survive, in order to cultivate their families. They and it basically was out of necessity. To the grocery stores and what they did because they were able to, and they started off in their little houses. Wow. They started off in their little houses and then, they already built it. But
It's actually very common to make it little like you can go to houses down and buy ice cream. This senora, so and so makes paletes, right? And so is the one who's selling because they have whatever means, maybe they have
Right.
chicken, maybe they have and so then coming here, it's like out of necessity, you start making things, making things work.
But there's others like that will give you more history. More history regarding the Del Mar during the war, what they did, what the women did, and also men. So, and there's a lot of different history information that we can plug in. As we start talking to the different families, and you go, oh, I didn't know that. I remember that. So, and that's really what we need to.
Yeah, because there's a lot of history that's being lost because and thank goodness like for like individuals like in this case Lisa is part of the historical society here that's able to collect that and uh, that history to be able to pass it on. Unless we hear from our families, and sometimes for whatever reason they don't think it's important to share, or it's something else is behind it, and without realizing how valuable it is, right? But I think for the families that we currently have here in this area, I think as a organization, we're trying really hard to continue to cultivate that leadership, and with the properties here, some of the restaurants, they have changed names, and it's like, wait, so and so owned it, which family? But luckily, something about it that we've still been able to maintain in place and small, and they're still here, and I think that's you just try to reinvent it to try to stay with the times of what the needs are. And to be able to have the market, the bluebird, ya no está,
Yeah.
and
There's plenty of stories though.
yeah.
Did you have access to doctors or the segregation, right? So how was that?
I don't know. I know in the 70s, but not it. I didn't work.
Like they had bottle of Gentiles 2 year with banderas,
Yeah.
with, and then a lot of the grandparents did their own doings, did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that we need to find out.
Well, and I think our community does so much herbal, using a lot of homeopathic like remedies that until it was like severe, and I think maybe that's why there's that mindset. It's like he, for the longest time, it's like you don't need insurance until you like really need it. Then you'll go to the doctor. Then you go to the hospital, not the doctor, the hospital, right? And so most more recently, where you have the Affordable Care Act, that people have access to insurance. That people are like, okay, now what do I do with this? Right, this new commodity that didn't exist before for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people was even if they were born and raised here, have been here for generations, have always been true to say to them, I'll service that because of just the bad treatment that maybe we got or our families haven't had a lot of like services.
Well,
Yeah. And I think that's why.
that's why, they do have in previous years, and I believe when they start, they have like their dentist here at St. Leo's Church, and they do have a medical thing. So it's come and gone because of, just regulations and stuff, and everything. But they did help, the community as much as they can with, some of those services and stuff. So, it was just,
No, and I know with the church, like St. Leo's, like, um, when I started working in some and helping with families and stuff, that St. Leo's was the place to go, right? Not for and and the interesting thing is that, like, what we've discussed is that people have grown up here, but they end up moving other places, but they always know to come here, right? Like this is where they can get some of those services, whether it's St. Leo's, whether it's Casa de Amistad, whether it's with Colonia Community Foundation or or even with Girls Club, like everybody comes home to be access some of those services and so yeah, it's had that. They have ophthalmologists for glasses and they've kind of connected. And I think that's kind of what the church has and the community members have like helped build that bridge for those services for a lot of the community that was here for years. Then when COVID happened, I think everybody kind of rallied and tried to figure out, okay, again, we're not living here anymore, but this is our community. So we wanted to make sure to like come back and see how we can support it. And we had
clinics here where they gave, the shots and stuff. So we did
vaccination.
There was reckless.
Yeah.
That's where all the families.
Yeah. It's a big family reunion.
Yeah, it is. And that was a whole purpose, though. Yeah. Developing, idea de los mentos on fiesta.
Yeah. No, and I think luckily with all the different different individuals who have becoming who grew up here and have gone and now are coming back like Claudia Castellan's on out grew up here on Juanita Street, her and her family, and here she is working for the Boys and Girls Clubs and providing enrichment programs for our community's kids and even employment opportunities for the older students. And then and for the Boys and Girls Club to designate this as Gloria's, Casita de Gloria. I think it's really, really shows it's just that there's always been leadership here. And when things need to get done and we see a need, we try to really hard to like make sure to do what we can to support it. Most recently we had one of our neighbors here, whose house caught on fire. She caused by a couple of residents, and they just wanted to get together and support, right? And I think that's kind of just very natural because that's what they see on from other community members. It's like, okay, then what we do, right? We support each other, we help each other. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of changes too, though.
Yeah, it's really important. One of the things I guess I was going to work on that one of the things we want to was wondering once they're done, he'd share with the schools, but also I was wondering if the museum had an opportunity to share these stories, the ones that Sid is going to compile. Like museums have, right?
Yeah.
Museums have.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we could think of
ways to incorporate.
Yeah,
kind of like they do at the what is it, the Holocaust Museum where they put the
I saw one
voices.
in the native space in Chicago. We're doing that, so I was thinking that we should probably and then we could probably also go to the other museums like
Oh, you know what? That's kind of cute.
Yeah, because we had the Encinitas ones. We're in Del Mar, don't they?
They have one, yeah, for the Del Mar. Yeah.
And maybe also Miracosta, they get to know the the
Yeah.
communities that
Yeah.
I want.
Yeah. So what we so I have the job that I get to do is work with the student ambassadors, and those are college students that we hired, and we train them about the communities that we're serving as Miracosta. And one of the stops is actually coming to La Colonia and learning about the history, so that when they are working with students of marginalized communities, they understand that there's history here and how important education is for individuals to see, get access to education, so then that way they can see how much of an impact that they can make, right? And so this is one of our stops. Carlsbad is one of our stops. We have another location in Oceanside that we go to. So I think that's kind of part of what we try to do. And I think with what we're doing with Black Colonia Community Foundation is one of our part of our mission is to educate the community about the history of this community. So yeah,
because it's, as you just said, is if you don't see it in the photos, right? We need to.
If you don't keep telling the stories, the pages will never open.
Yeah.
Well, so we have to share the stories. It's not just my story; it's her story, it's your story. You know, whether you were sharing the beginning or you were, so you still have a story.
Yeah.
To tell, like you advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like what you said, because I think that's something we could incorporate in our Dia de los Muertos, where, how we have the different families, but I think maybe it'd be kind of cool to start like doing like we could always do like a little QR code, and then it prompts to like a video recording or an audio recording that it really, so they can hear their voice,
Yeah.
So they're looking like, we're like, oh, this is da 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 da, this is what I do.
So last year's Dia de los Muertos, we honored the women, the pioneer women, the trailblazers of La Colonia. So some of the families, obviously there's more, but some of the families that wanted to participate, we had their portrait and a small narrative of what they contribute, whether it was big or small. Some of the women walked door to door to get them to vote. Some of them were advocates for the park or church. My mom was the first gospel brownie leader back in the day. So even though it was small, it was still something. And some my mom. I go, your mom was here. Your mom was here. She was part of she went to the meetings, or she made food, or she cooked. Some of the stories that they used to just cook. And that was important.
Yeah.
It was all important.
No, because I think I saw it clipping once. That it was, oh gosh, I think it was the 1950s. And it was the newspaper clipping. And it was talking about how there was a Rotary Club here against.
Yes.
And it was all the majority Latinos, that they were organized to try to like fundraise for different things. I'm like, I don't think I remember seeing a Rotary Club where like I saw brown people in, right?
Yeah.
And or this community, right? Or I knew about it at the time growing up, and it's just like, oh, we ended up seeing something similar, and we created something, or it came about, and we just never, saw it again, because it all happened because of a need that needed to take care of.
Right.
And
so this year that was last year, we honored the women, and it was a very beautiful addition to Dia de los Muertos as far as sharing, and that's where that.
Do you think you could share some? I don't have your email, but if you share, I will send it to.
that'd be cool.
And if you can share, please as well.
Yeah, and actually, I think we put it on our Instagram too.
Yeah.
Right, and I think Natalie put all the different stories of the individuals that we shared. But yeah, we can
do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yes, and I think that's what we're trying to do, is like think of like ways to continue that oral history, but write it down so that because I've always grown up with the we're told like once it's printed, it's it's there for life, and now if it's on the internet, if it's on paper, it's official, right? I think that's one of the things that we have to learn is like we have oral history, but we have to take pen to paper so that it's written down and it's so that someone else can read it.
Well,
Right?
yeah. Well, you should do that was great, right, sir? It was
A lot of information.
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you for inviting us.
yeah. This was like I met Gabby at the birthday party and I
Yes.
just got hold of her.
Yeah, she's like, Gabby. I'm like, what? What's up?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm Sheila. I'm like, hello, Sheila. And then we started doing some Zumba, here and there. And she's like, hey, I'm meeting with Lisa. We're doing this thing and da da da. And she's like, I'd like you to participate. I'm like, okay, cool. I know some people too, and I'm gonna bring them around and stuff and see who I can bring in because I think it's the collective, of
It
those
was a
stories.
collective.
Yeah, yeah.
So just needs to be documented and to be broadcast as many places. That's the approach that Europeans have done for a long time. Right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
had it in the paper.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the
So
time.
now we have to just get as much, especially with Trump.
Oh yeah.
And,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Which is, we have a
that was had a Trump sign on it.
yeah, this
That
ironworks here, which is very very disappointing to kind of see because I mean
They haven't part of the community so much. But the
yeah, and so something happened. There was
Is it owned by
a white person or
what?
that I don't know that history.
there was a story about it. I don't know much about. It was a strong red.
That's at least a
Yeah, it was. It was the information from the historical society and went on doing it different spots,
within the
like
community.
within the community of you know, yeah,
Historic response.
yes.
Yeah. You were thinking. Yeah. No. All I knew is like this was the bus stop that picked us up to take us all the way to Torrey Pines, which is quite a distance.
Yeah.
That was the some of us. I guess originally all these students from this community would go to San Diego, right?
Yes.
And then San Diego, then eventually the district opened up Torrey Pines. And then when I was here in the 90s, they would pick us up here and they would bus us all the way to Del Mar to the school. And we'd arrive in the bus and all the other cars that were parked there, all these really expensive cars.
Yeah.
And it was always I guess when you're like a kid, you don't realize it or recognize it so much. But technically, that's where it's like where the term like busing, busing people to areas that aren't technically, their area. So schools. And so it's like, wow, I guess technically we were bused too. All those times we get picked up here, dropped off over there, and yeah, very, very interesting. Very interesting to grow up because the school catered to the Solana Beach students, the district Del Mar district students, and the Rancho Santa Fe district students. So when you put all of those communities together, and there was racial issues that were happening on campus.
Always.
And I saw it in growing up there in the 90s with the high school and
I saw it back in the 60s.
yeah,
Was I came to
for San Diego.
no right here.
You know one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand
Yeah.
why. I mean, there was a kind of you saw it as part of life,
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
But still, why? Why do people treat you like that? Why
Yeah.
do people look at you like them?
And I think that's part of it, or it's like because we didn't know we were different because we grew up in this area and we were all like, but when we had to venture out to school, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're different?
Yeah.
Really? Because I don't feel
Or even though our elders were segregated, but they didn't teach that.
no, they didn't.
They didn't like tell you that you were different or that you were, you only had don't or that we were segregated. Yeah, that we were segregated, and of course I'm 2 years younger, but and I grew up in Encinitas, but still it wasn't, the families never, they always embraced us. They embraced other families, other cultures.
Yeah.
We were all, even Encinitas back in the Bay anyway, we were all family.
There, we didn't know we were different until someone told us or said some slur that we would come home and be like, what's wet family?
Yeah.
Why are they telling me to go back to my country? Like, I grew up here, then, or else, why are they saying that, Spanish must be really easy? Spanish class would be really easy for you. It's like, really? Because I've never taken a Spanish class. Yeah. All these different things that we didn't realize. And I think that's where it's so important, where ethnic studies comes in, to where it's like, I think our parents didn't uh, didn't realize that we needed to know that, right? And or to know our history,
Either that they protected us.
to protect us from it, and they didn't know. I mean, they're too busy trying to survive. But I think that's where ethnic studies is so important, because when you understand that you're part of the history, and you can kind of be able to pinpoint, like, no, look, this is what my community has done, and this is how we're part of it. So you can tell me that it hasn't, but I will tell you that my tia, my tío were part of this and this, and they were present, and and this is what movement happened, and this is how it went forward, and so I know I belong, and I know that I'm, that I can and I am entitled to these programs and services, and I'm entitled to education. You might, and I think that's one of the other things too, is like education.
Yeah.
Right. Where even when we weren't part of the schools, because you had a Latino name, a surname, right, that you were separated somehow. And how that was, and how many, students who really brilliant and were still kept, down, and weren't showing the the reverence that they should have, or the mentorship to be able to be like, wow, might be the next scientist who's going to discover the cure to this, or the next, astronaut who's going to be able to do that, or the next, business that's going to, be a worldwide thing, whatever, whatever that is. And so many people that had to, like, it almost kind of like delayed their excellence, because they were, how can you be excellent at a young age if no one, like, if you get all this negativity?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not until you discover by accident, right, through classes, and then you have maybe the opportunity to go to school, to go to college or whatever, and learn some of this information, that you learn, like, oh, wow, had I been told this information then, I would have shined way earlier in life than I am now. But we still managed to do it.
Right.
I think that's important.
Sorry. Very important.
Yeah. Yep.
So glad we had this opportunity.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. Thank you. And,
And Sid is just amazing. He is
awesome.
Fights for against genocide, against every problem in this world.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's important, and we need different people to capture all that
Yeah.
that's going on now, what's happened in the past, and because we keep repeating history because apparently we haven't learned it. You know,